John Scott here with Jonathan Acosta. Bills looking to move on after that dreadful loss to the Dolphins this past weekend down in South Florida. Buccaneers are up next, but we'll just focus kind of in-house to start. Some housekeeping. Mecole Hardman, and it's Mecole, not Mecole, like maybe you've heard in his days with Kansas City. Mecole Hardman signed to the Bills practice squad. Similar to maybe a Gabe Davis conversation, what do you believe are realistic expectations for him making an impact on the actual team?
I don't think a realistic expectation would be for him to come in and all of a sudden be a wide receiver 1 or even a wide receiver 2 on the team. But I do think his versatility and his speed is something that can benefit this offense, right? Because the Bills, not just necessarily struggling in the pass game, but the return game hasn't been anything to sort of write home about. If he can sort of give them a boost there and help this team in terms of the field position and where they're on average starting drives, it's those hidden yards that can really help maybe benefit an offense in a way that is maybe not so visible to the naked eye, right? So that can be a little bit of a boost. And then maybe if he just can come in and be that kind of guy where gets 2 or 3 catches a game, if they can schematically find ways to get him the ball, which, you know, is easier said than done, because you could say there's other guys in the wide receiver room that they need to find that also. If you think of Khalil Shakir, right, all the times he's catching the ball behind the line of scrimmage, they need to find ways to get him the ball in other ways. So there's still work to be done on the offense, but I think this is an offense that going forward is going to be integrating both Mecole Hardman and Gabe Davis. Does that give it enough of a different look to where it looks and performs differently than how it did in Miami?
It once again is going to fall on Joe Brady if and when these guys get elevated to the game day roster to make it work. Because you know where Mecole Hardman has played the majority of his snaps? In the slot, where Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel and Elijah Moore, they all do the same thing.
Dalton Kincaid when he's
yeah. So that's an interesting piece to this of Hardman did say today, hey, I have expanded, I have played some outside, try to get some one-on-one matchups, but he makes his bread and butter in some of the highlights we even showed when they signed against the Bills with the Chiefs, end arounds in the slot, working underneath and just using his legs. We'll be curious to see the timeline of potentially when he gets back and comes up to the active roster when that comes, and what sort of an impact he's going to make.
Well, I mean, for one thing, he could be active soon if they think, for example, that he's already the best return guy on the team. I mean, we've seen Brandon Codrington be inactive in situations where you feel like, hey, they can make him active and have him be the return guy. So I think that's a big aspect to them signing Hardman. And so if they feel like he's ready to go and he's shown them enough, I wouldn't be surprised to see him active relatively soon, at least in that role.
Injuries, obviously the other humongous ones. The list still continues to be incredibly long, but I actually find it encouraging here as we're on a Wednesday. Only Dalton Kincaid really noteworthy, not practicing. Sean McDermott saying the other day he's week to week. That's definitely a big blow for an offense where, amazingly, after all the dialogue in the offseason about how Dalton Kincaid needs to elevate his play, he's the most consistent and productive guy on the team.
That's right. And so you look at the other aspect of it where it's really felt like all season the Bills have gotten guys back, but then they lose a guy, and then they happen to be getting another guy back. That's just sort of the way that the season has gone, right? Like, for example, on defense, they lose Landon Jackson, right? Daquan Jones had to kick outside and whatnot, but now they're getting back a TJ Sanders, for example, back at practice this week. You're losing a Dalton Kincaid in the pass game, but you're getting back a Josh Palmer potentially, who's a full participant at practice today. And I think you were starting to see maybe a glimpse of what he could provide this offense in that Atlanta game before he got injured, right? So, the good thing with Palmer is that, you know, the Bills have other pieces that can work inside. Josh Palmer is really that guy that you've been waiting to see. Is like, can he give this team something outside to really complement the other pieces in this offense? So I think Palmer practicing today in full is an encouraging sign. And do we start to see maybe of what this Bills offense can truly be like once you get to January? Do we get a glimpse of that with Palmer returning to the field maybe against Tampa Bay?
And the defense, I mean, Javon Solomon's playing inside, Daquan Jones is playing outside, but A.J. Epinesa, I don't know if he's officially cleared concussion protocol, but he's a full participant, as you said. TJ Sanders, a full participant. So there's 2 guys on the defensive line that's depleted that appear to be on their way back. Secondary-wise, Christian Benford says he's feeling good. He was limited. Taron Johnson, limited. These guys, Cam Lewis, limited. But these guys all appear like they're trending in the right direction. So you could go from absolutely depleted and looking at this Bills defense at Miami saying, oh my God, who is even going to be able to take the field, to now welcome the Bucs to town on Sunday and say they might almost be fully whole just like that.
And would be very important, especially going up against a Bucs team that, they have Rashad White, who's a very good running back, but their top back, Bucky Irving, who's been out since September, he returned to practice today for the Bucs in their Wednesday walkthrough, right? And if he can go, that certainly gives their run game a juice against a Bills run defense that has certainly been the weakness of this team so far this year. So certainly getting as many healthy bodies back as you can would be something that this team would like, potentially going up against a guy like Bucky Irving.
One thing that stands out to me for now a couple weeks, post-game and other times we've heard from Sean McDermott, he's mentioned attitude. He seems to really be emphasizing, hey, against Kansas City, we play with an attitude. We play with this edge, and that was what he thought was a good springboard to the stellar performance they had against Mahomes and company. Conversely, after the Dolphins game, you're hearing things about lack of effort. They wanted it more, things like that. And then here today, McDermott reiterating, he took a question about Baker Mayfield and his style of play and attitude and kind of steered it towards what his team needs to do. It seems to be an interesting conversation to be having here as we're entering Week 11, trying to really push your team to get to a certain level in the mental side of things to try to catch up and get there physically as well.
The attitude thing stuck out to me, and I think there's just some things going on with this team where I feel like they're maybe working through things at this stage of the season that they haven't had to at other parts. Because the other one that stuck out to me was he was asked a question about the team's offensive identity, where it feels like, especially last year under Joe Brady, right, it really felt like they had an identity. McDermott admitted that they're still working through it, and it's the second time I remember this season, in sort of the second half of the season, where he's admitted to still looking for an offensive identity, still working through it. And he mentioned the pieces in and out on offense and stuff like that. But I think that provides you a glimpse in that this team doesn't have everything figured out yet. And they're still 6-3 to their credit, right? So you're coming off a lot against Miami, and, the sky is falling and everything. But it's a team that is still working through things and doesn't think that this version of what they are right now is going to be the final version. And in reality, teams always want to be improving, right? It'd be a different conversation if we felt like maybe this team had peaked and they're like, it's only on the downswing from here. I don't think anyone thinks this team has peaked. Certainly has a lot of room to grow. And so you can look at it both ways, whether it be that you think it's a concern that this offense doesn't already have an identity, or this team saying, hey, we just have to get everyone healthy, figure out the pieces that we might be adding in terms of like a Hardman or a Davis from the practice squad, and then once all the pieces are together, what does this offense look like? I think it's a fascinating lens and something that I think is interesting to hear Sean McDermott comment on.
We know the formula for success that they would prefer. It's James Cook runs the football and the passing game is complementary. An ironic sense, considering you have the MVP as their quarterback and Josh Allen as Mr. All-World. But the problem has come, they have no counter. They have no secondary pitch. It's when the fastball is not working, they don't have a changeup or a curveball to go to, and that's where I go to the coaching staff, and it's specifically on offense and Joe Brady of teams are going to stack the box, they're going to press, and I know the Bucs blitz a lot, and we've seen in instances when this offense has looked at its worst, it's when they're sending blitzes like the Atlanta game, and that's going to have to be something that falls on the coaching staff and Joe Brady in particular with the play calling to say, this is what we can do to pivot off of what we would prefer to still have success.
A few notes. One, Miami's defense is not that great, right? And they sold out to stop the run against Buffalo, and you saw what happened for the Bills' offense that day. Second of all, if you think back to just under Joe Brady's offensive coordinatorship, maybe one of the worst performances, maybe if not the worst, one of the worst, was last year in Houston, right? I think it really exposed some of the issues with this offense. Who do they play after Tampa? Prime time in Houston against the Texans. So it's not something that this team necessarily needs to figure out for this week, but they're playing against some of these good defenses. They've got Philly down the road, another really good defense. We saw what they did on Monday Night Football against the Packers, right? So it's not just an issue of last week. It's not just an issue of this first half of the season, but the Bills are going to need to start to find some of these answers in the pass game for some of the defenses that they have left on their schedule.
Defensively tackling, once again, an issue. Sean McDermott did kind of take a step back and walk it back a little bit, saying Devon Achane, one of the best. We knew it was going to be challenging here. But Daquan Jones was pretty frank and said, hey, like, we got to be ticked off, and we can't look for excuses. Like everyone, Christian Benford saying, you just have to do your job. And I feel like that's a reoccurring theme. Much of what we discuss about their issues are reoccurring here. And again, we're going into week 11, and we're talking about do your job, basic fundamentals. To your point about the offense, is it encouraging or discouraging that you know what the problems are and they seem so simple to fix, even though they're constantly happening.
Right, and then I think that also plays back into the Sean McDermott's attitude comments, right? Because they can be in here in practice coaching these things like tackling. But at the end of the day, Sean McDermott is not getting in pads and going out there on game day on Sunday and making the tackles for his defense. He needs his players to go out there and make that tackle. It becomes an attitude sort of thing where if this is a recurring issue, it really is up to these players to sort of put on the helmet, put on the shoulder pads, and go out and make that tackle and not dive for the legs and miss and wrap up and bring a guy down. So at some point, it's the players have to take ownership of some of the issues on this defense, because I think at least for the most part defensively, they played, considering the pieces they had and everything, relatively well against Miami for about 3 quarters, and then Achane broke off the 2 big runs in the 4th quarter. But I think overall, there have been encouraging signs from this defense against Miami, and especially the way again that they played against Kansas City.
Tampa coming into town, 1 o'clock on Sunday. Thank you. We're all happy about that. Baker Mayfield is Baker Mayfield. He's ascended to a different level, settled into that in Tampa. You said Bucky Irving, we'll see if he plays. Rashad White, fine. Emeka Egbuka, awesome. Arguably the rookie of the year. Outside of
Where
that,
do you go to school?
The Ohio State. That's why I'm actually wearing red. That's beyond that, no Chris Godwin, no Mike Evans, Kate Otten at the tight end position. Defensively, they're kind of middle of the road. Like I said, they're pretty aggressive. So it's not supposed to be something that maybe looks as daunting as it did earlier in the season when they were rolling and fully healthy. Bill's just got to put up or shut up at this point in time, because the division is almost out of reach, and now you got to start thinking about the crowd in that position for the wild card, ones that don't include currently Kansas City and Baltimore, who we know are not going anywhere.
One thing to maybe watch out for is maybe the potential for explosive plays against Tampa. Their last game against New England, the Patriots hit them for 3 big touchdowns. 1 to Kyle Williams in the air, Travion Henderson, 2 through the ground, right? We've seen, if anything, that this offense has is the ability to hit explosive plays in the run game with James Cook. So that could be a potential thing to watch out for with this offense. And then I feel like, especially with Hardman now, if they decide to make him active, you don't necessarily have the vertical threat, but you have guys that can get yards after the catch in terms of a Curtis Samuel, an Elijah Moore, a Khalil Shakir, a Mecole Hardman. So, again, a lot of it, I think, a lot of the discussion we're going to be having the rest of this year is going to revolve around Joe Brady. The pieces that they have are the pieces that they have. How does he go about using them to maximize this offense? Certainly a potential for them to find some explosive plays against Tampa Bay.
You're already dialed in with the Mecole Hardman thing. If he gets called up, I'm going to have to be really, really on top of things. Mecole, it's amazing. Some guys play in the league.
It's like the Bijan Robinson discussion.
Or
yeah.
Tyrod Taylor. You talk about a guy for 6-7 years in the league, and boom, you got to completely change their name. Yeah. John Scott, Jonathan Acosta, that's not changing for Channel 2 Sports.